I'm just waiting a couple of seconds that everybody is going to be connected. I see still some people in the waiting room, and so we are happy to welcome you once again. So it has been a very interesting week. I have seen many people also in the platform concluding the different e-learning activities. We are going to come back to this later on. But really the idea is to now focus on the first building block that of the skills development systems that we talked about last Tuesday. As usual, I would like to remind everybody that the webinar is available in 2 languages. There is a globe icon on the bottom of your Zoom interface. Please select English or Arabic, depending on the language you want to follow the webinar in. So today we are going to concentrate in particular to a very foundational topic, I would say, probably the topic that is somehow also overarching among all the other topics. That is a skills development policy formulation. So what are the key features of a skills development policy, the process, the involvement of all parties? So I think that this is a very important presentation, and one that will give us really more knowledge and more skills on how to implement this very important process that is the process of defining the priorities, the objectives, and also, let's say, the involved stakeholders in our skills development policy. We have already touched upon some of the issues last webinar on Tuesday, and it was really interesting to see also how you have not only reasoned in terms of what's happening in your country, but also how the collaboration within the countries can really help out the skills development system. So, of course, we salute the involvement and the investment that many of your countries are doing on skills development, and we really want to support as ILO this process. So I'm also, by the way, greeting my own colleagues connecting from Geneva and from the other parts of the region. It's really nice to see you once again. Today, we are going once again to have a speaker with us. And let's say, for the sake of also language balance, in the next 2 webinars, today and the next webinar next Tuesday, we will have an Arabic speaking speaker, so that we can also balance out a little bit in terms of languages. Our speaker is Mr. Brahim Toumi, who is from Tunisia. He has been, let's say, covering very important posts in the ministry related to vocational training and employment, but I think he will tell some few words about himself later on. He's now serving as an international consultant for all the most important international organizations working on skills. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor to Brahim and leave him the space for his presentation. Thank you very much, and have a nice webinar.
Thank you, Stefano. Bonjour tout le monde. صباح الخير للجميع. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Good morning. Greetings to all of you. The introduction of Stefano was enough, therefore no need to present myself. Therefore, I will move directly to my presentation on employment and skills development. I will share my screen with you. As I said, this presentation is about preparing technical and vocational skills development policies As an introduction or an entry point to achieving skills development in relation to the needs of the labor market, my presentation will span of over 25 to 30 minutes. And of course, you may ask questions during the presentation in case you might need some clarification before we continue the presentation. And then after I finish my presentation, we will have a Q&A so that you may ask your questions and comments. We will discuss the preparation of skills development policies. We will tackle the relationship between skills development and the needs of the labor market, as well as the main components, the priorities, the entrants, horizontal entrants that are of interest to many stakeholders. And we will also tackle the issue of employability and job search, which requires the implication of all stakeholders before we conclude with the steering committee framework and the conclusion. When it comes to the policies, we can find policies in each and every sector, be it the education, health, youth, sports, and public policies in a specific field aims to finding solutions to a problem or a set of problems that the existing authority considers a priority to address. The public policy content is about setting a general framework that explains the values that represent the state's vision in the relevant field, as well as the medium and long-term objectives. Then we have general trends for the policy sector. Policy is also a distribution of decision-making power, the sharing of responsibilities at the horizontal level, at the centralized and decentralized levels, and sharing of responsibilities in terms of implementation, so that we can know who will be in charge of implementing each part of this policy. It is usually accompanied by an action plan that sets out the objectives, the expected results, activities, and the resources necessary to implement the policy, as well as indicators of achievement. Usually, it is the state or the public authority that undertakes formulating such policies with the implication or the involvement of partners. Usually, the state is represented by the authority in charge of the sector. For instance, for an educational policy, then the Ministry of Education and will be in charge of developing and formulating this policy and the strategy. A policy is usually general in nature, and it should also be accompanied by a strategy for the coming years. Such initiative by the government or the state doesn't mean that it will work alone on the formulation of such a vision. It should also involve other stakeholders and partners, including the civil society. Here are the stages of the determination of the policy, and some references you might find 5 or 6 stages. However, here we will have only 4. First, we have to select our choices or options, which will serve as an entry point for the formulation of the policy. We can't hear the speaker anymore.
نعم نستمع.
شكرا. تحديد الخيارات يكون هو المنطلق الأساسي.
So determining our choices, this should be the main determinant, followed by policy formulation. Then Mr. Akram, do you have a question or do you have an intervention? Because your microphone is on. I can't hear you well, says the speaker. Again, apologies, says the speaker. I don't know if you have a technical glitch, any technical issues, because we can't hear you. May I go on with my presentation? I can see that Mr. Ahmed wishes to take the floor, but I can't hear him clearly.
No, I think that Mr. Al-Anaizi has some problem.
So we can go ahead.
We can go ahead. We can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. ثم نمر إذا إلى تنفيذ السياسة.
أنا شو أسوي؟ هذه جوابين لازم نحضرها.
If we could kindly mute the microphone of Mr. Abdul Hussein, please.
ربما ترك السماعة مفتوحة. أكمل أستاذنا الكريم.
شكرا. ثم تمر الهيئات المعنية بتنفيذ السياسة.
The competent authorities will implement the policy before assessing the results, and the assessment is part of the formulation and preparation of the next policy. So this is a cycle conducted by public authorities or competent authorities every 4 or 5 years, depending on the decision agreed upon. First, determining the choices. The starting point is to determine the vision of the existing authority in relation to a particular problem. So the authority considers that there is a specific topic that should be considered and tackled, and that requires a policy in this respect. Therefore, they would set the vision for such a policy, including all the values that they wish to implement on the short, medium, and long term. Then diagnosing the authority's intervention area at the national, regional, and sectoral levels. Allow me to give you a quick example about this. For example, when it comes to the public health, I will not discuss the skills development now. I'll get back to this later on. But let's suppose that the state or the government wishes to establish a policy for public health. Among the choices given to the state, for example, is the scope. Will they mainly focus on the public sector, or will they allow private sector also to intervene? What about physicians, nurses, and all health practitioners? Will there be involved? Who will be involved? Who will be in charge of funding? So these are the choices made by the state when developing a policy, and they should be based on pre-selected options. They also have to diagnose or to know who the target groups are, so that they can benefit from the policy. Then we have a methodology. We will have evaluation and prospective studies. And then we will link this to related policies. Yes, please. Would you like to take the floor? So we will have to link this to other policies, for example, employment or recruitment policies, and we will have to do an extrapolation also of this problem. For instance, if we find that we have an issue or a problem that doesn't have a big impact, maybe we would decide to tackle another issue with a higher impact first. And also we have to use comparative experiences in order to benefit from such experiences in our policy, which should be feasible implementable, and in line with the international standards and trends. The policy formulation, we have to first identify strengths and weaknesses and accurately diagnose problems. When we reach the stage of formulation, we have to identify those issues and their root causes precisely. We also have to develop scenarios to address problems and to devise solutions. Usually, when we face a problem, we can find different ways of resolving the issues. We have to determine priorities by considering several data and hypotheses. First, we have to study the extent of feasibility, because it is not useful to have a policy that cannot be feasible or implementable. We also have to identify available resources for the implementation of the policy and direct and indirect effects. Some policies can have impacts or positive impacts or collateral adverse impacts. Therefore, we have to identify all potential impacts or effects to reduce adverse impacts and try to mainly focus on the positive ones. Then we have to set objectives, the expected results, the indicators, activities, means, the timeline for achievement, follow-up, and evaluation methods. Indicators are of paramount importance and should be well formulated and diverse. We have achievement indicators as well as outcome indicators and impact indicators. So they do exist at different levels and they have to be predefined. We also have to determine how they can be followed up for the purpose of assessment later on, for a positive assessment. Policy implementation. Usually, the authorized and competent entities at the national, regional, and local levels are entrusted with the implementation of the public policy, depending on their different visions in the competent countries. For instance, some countries have over-centralization or decentralization. Some countries have a federal regime or system with local governments that are in charge of decision-making, etc., etc. We can also create ad hoc teams for the implementation of some parts of the scheme. If I go back to the public health issue, for instance, we can have an ad hoc team specializing in field medicine, who can, for example, address the needs of patients and citizens who needs health care. In addition to indicators, we might need to have a handbook to guide our processes. Usually, there is a steering committee composed of different stakeholders, and we assess the outcomes through the achievement indicators. And with the support of the steering committee, we can also recruit third-party service providers for the assessment, especially when it comes to evaluating and assessing policies. So usually resort to audit and assessment bureaus or cabinets. And as we said, we use the results of the assessment in order to refine the public policies. When it comes to technical and vocational skills development policies, there is a close link between technical and vocational skills development policy, and usually national policies are related to development, to investment, labor, and social affairs. Because skill development issue is usually cross-cutting in all sectors. Many countries have chosen to have the skills development and work issues overseen by one single ministry. As Mr. Stefano said, I used to work at the Ministry of Vocational Training and Employment in Tunisia. So all of these fields have been covered by the same ministry in order to ensure an interlinkage or an interdependency. In other countries, we might have ministries for skills development and others for vocational training and employment. However, there should be a close cooperation and coordination between both. One of the main challenges in this respect is unemployment. And here we can refer to a publication by the ILO in 2017 highlighting the global challenges facing young people and proposing policies to provide more decent work opportunities for young men and women. And in the preamble, we read that young people entering the labor market today face an arduous task to find permanent decent work opportunities, as unemployment rates are constantly rising in light of the increase in opportunities for temporary and unorganized work and other forms of precarious work. And 2 out of 5 young men or women in the world are either unemployed or they work but still live in poverty. So whenever we decide to devise a policy for skills development, technical and vocational skills development, so the main challenge is how to find a job for young graduates. To illustrate this, we can see here that unemployment rates in the OECD countries are as such. The higher the level of training, the higher the rates of unemployment. However, in other countries, this is not the case. In Egypt, for instance, when we have a basic training or when there is no training, unemployment rates are low. They hover around 10%. However, unemployment rates can reach 50% in other countries, in Bangladesh and Bolivia. Unemployment rates are proportional to training and educational attainment rates. Then we have what we call needs, not in education, employment, or training. We have the Global Employment Trends for Youth 2022, published by the ILO, that we use to understand the situation for different categories. For instance, in blue, you can see the rates for men and women. And we can see a big difference between men and women in this respect. For the Arab countries, that is for the MENA region and the Gulf countries, the rates is above 50% for women, with a total rate of 20% and a rate exceeding 30 to 35% for men. It is a bit difficult to hear the speaker. There is a terrible echo. And this showcases the level of challenges in various countries, and especially in the Arab countries when it comes to youth employment and the need to find decent jobs for young men and women. There is a lack of coordination and a weak linkage between the training offer and the demand for skills, especially when it comes to the private sector. And by private sector, we mean the productive, the investing sector that will generate job opportunities. And this is resulting in a poor compatibility between the training offer and the demand for skills. When employers and trainers are not well linked, this will result in a poor communication and will generate a mismatch between generated skills and the demand for of the labor market. We have also an inadequate role of social partners, an inappropriate institutional framework. When we do not have enough databases providing us with necessary information and data to guide our processes, this will create more mismatch. Sometimes certain groups are absent or are not considered adequately. This is the case of women in many regions in the world, and we've already mentioned young people aged between 15 and 24 that are in the needs category, as well as agricultural workers, rural workers, etc.
الهيكلية ضعيفة لمسارات التعليم. التعليم غالبا ما يكون في جوانب غير مترابطة.
So sometimes education, we have some linkage between the education and higher education. I'll give you an example of Tunisia regarding the vocational training. So whatever the levels of education, they have the possibility to go to higher education at any level they want. And this lack of linkage, for example, sometimes gives us the possibility or give us a result. So some people, when they leave the higher education and after having passed 3 years to get a license or a BA, in their own specialty, they have to go to vocational training for them to be able to go to the labor market, because the diploma that they have in the higher education is not enough for them to be able to go and work. And some of the graduates also will not have the possibility to join the higher education, whatever their educational level is. So there is no linkage between the vocational and the academic training. So we need more flexibility and adaptation to the development of the product, the production means. And sometimes we have problems regarding the structure, regarding also the reviewing of the curriculum for us to be able to go on training on some skills that are required in the labor market, some things that have really developed on the labor market, but we were not able to follow on in the curriculum. Also, the structural weakness of the economies in some countries that makes us incapable of creating new jobs for people, decent jobs. So some countries, like for example in the Northern Africa area, they do not have any high added value in their production, allowing the possibility of giving or providing some job opportunities that will lead to decent work. Consequently, we have a very big need to have some links between the politics of skills development and the labor policies. Consequently, we have here in this graph the progress of some countries that are adopting the employment policies. I'll give you an example here. In 2000, we had very little countries having job policies. Afterwards, in 2010, for example, we had more than 20 countries that have followed this specific method in order to prepare labor and employment policies. And afterwards, in 2020 and plus, we have had 120 countries that have their own studies. Consequently, we have different countries also that have prepared some policies more than once. Consequently, they did not only produce a policy for employment only once, but they have done it regularly every like 5 or 10 years. So we see these countries by names. We also see here, I would like to remind Stefano that we have Madagascar here that has taken part to the preparation of the 2015 policy, and they also had one in 2005. Consequently, it's a 10-year cycle. We also note in this graph the link that we have between the impact and what we need to do. So we have some policies and the labor market policies in the square. Also, we have the policies, the macroeconomic policies, the sectorial production policy, and the environment, the conducive environment for a sustainable development. Consequently, we need to have all these elements that are related to these policies. So when I say macroeconomy, this talks about the macro balance of the economy. When we talk about the productive policy of the country, and the conducive environment for a sustainable development, this means that we need to have some activities take into consideration the environment and environment friendly, but also we need to see the skills and the employability, the social protection, other social policies that need to be taken into consideration, and some common issues like passing to the regularity, because in different countries we see that we have formal and non-formal work and irregular work as well. We need also to take into consideration the issues of gender, youth, vulnerable groups, also passing towards the green labor in different aspects. Consequently, all these policies need to be taken into consideration. What are the best inputs regarding this issue? First of all, we need to take into consideration the issue of training and skills development, but we also need to recognize them in order to guarantee to the trainee, that he will be recognized in the labor market, and the labor market needs to know what are the specifications of the diploma that the trainee will receive. Consequently, the labor market will know what to improve the access of all categories to the development of skills and the labor market, and focus on employability and decent work to develop. Also, we have some common works that are needed, like, for example, facilitating the work and social dialogue with all the production stakeholders. We need to also support the coordination between the employability or employment policies and the skills development policies. As we have already said, we need to have something that is in harmony between the policies of employment and the training. Also, we need to improve the training, take into consideration equity and inclusion, because we have many categories that are complaining for not having enough opportunities of training. And here we can say as well that it is possible to develop this training access, like through opening the institutions for training that takes place in training centers and training institutions. Not to forget also the vocational training in the labor place. in the workplace, excuse me, we also need to encourage on some sectorial approaches, because it is sometimes easy to link between a specific industry, let's say electronics, electricity, with some institutions that will work on training these students on electricity and electronics, supporting the passage towards green economy and activities that are environment friendly. Consequently, this policy of employment is a vision. It is a framework of that goes in par with the vision, and both the vision and the framework can be macro, meso, and micro. They can be quality and quantity. They need to have the governance that is required to reach the best cost efficiency, taking into consideration, as we said, the macro, meso, and micro levels that gather all the stakeholders playing a very important role in achieving and meeting the objectives of employment, and to reach, of course, decent work. And even those who do not really intervene and do not have a lot to do, including them in the elaboration of these policies, make them a very important element that can provide more support and more efficiency in the achievement of this policy. These policies can take different aspects based on the context of each country, because of course we cannot transport the context of a country to another country. Consequently, we need to take into consideration all these elements. We have some countries like Indonesia, Djibouti, and South Africa have some policies that are included in the Sustainable Development Plan. We have, for example, Brazil that works on a regional level. In Brazil, for example, their policy for employment and the skills development, it is at the governmental, at the governance provinces level. We also have the strategies that are focusing on some specific groups or specific issues like youth strategies. I'll give you the example of Egypt, Paraguay, and Ecuador, and the strategies of green jobs like in Argentina, and other kinds of strategies. Consequently, employment is a commitment amongst the different interveners, and we can see here that the ministry can be a Ministry of Youth, of Employment, or others. And it is linked to all the other ministries, the Ministry of Finance and the Economy, the sectorial ministries, industry, health, statistics, civil society, social partners. Consequently, it is a very important element for everybody. For leadership, this is a simplified example, because in the leadership also we can find different and more complex examples. We have leadership at different levels. So we can have, for example, the ministries, the concerned ministries that are represented. And also we have the social partners like the employers and the representatives of the trade unions linked to the different ministries. So to the right, we can see the specific ministries and the social partners, the stakeholders. Sometimes the ministry that is responsible for the skills development and employment is the one that in general relies on specific agencies and technical administrations. I'll give you some examples. In Tunisia, the ministry that is responsible for skills development relies on 4 agencies: the employment agency, the training for trainers, and the training structure, and another agency for lifelong training and labor training. So we have different countries having such agencies. We also have some technical administrations at the ministries, and in some places we also have another access In conclusion, we can say that the policy, the employment policy is the entry point to solve the issues that are related to the labor market. When we want to establish a policy in relation with the skills development, so this policy is the entry point. Including the function, employment or the on-job training. And also we have to take into consideration the national plan, for example, regarding the elaboration of a modern infrastructure requiring a huge investment. The policy for the development of these elements need to work in collaboration with all these plans for us to have enough labor market and labor force and give the youth opportunities to work. We can also have employment policies that will be a good entry point to solve some problems. What do I mean by that? Some countries have focus on specific issues for women. If we want women to have an opportunity of employment or job opportunities, consequently, while preparing their skills and while developing their skills, we need to focus on women. So we need also to have a skills development policy that is entrenched at the local and national level, because this is the way we can go on with our work while passing from one policy to another. While if we take a specific structure that is based on this specific issue on specific time, we may lose some of our gains, our acquisitions, and we will not have enough sustainability. So this is mainly what I had. And thank you for your attention. I am ready, of course, to answer any of your questions in case you have any.
Thank you very much, Brahim. I don't know if there are already some questions after this very interesting and intense presentation. Please, Mohammed.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. صباح الخير.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim, for this wonderful presentation. My name is Muhammad Al-Ahmadi from the Kingdom of Bahrain. I have a very quick question, and this is related to the presentation. In fact, you have a strategic presentation related to the frameworks of planning and execution. I have a small point. I see that we need to focus on a specific issue, which is the issue of data and the role of data now in influencing the frameworks that we have in order for us to work on a kind of update or modernization of these frameworks for them to go or to comply to the new currents. Consequently, I see the novelties that we have seen, namely in the technology. It influences a lot, and it sometimes disrupts these frameworks that you have talked about. So today, if we really want to work on innovation and we really are keen on finding some innovative solutions for our labor market, I think that we need to resort to technology for us to find some solutions and to have some partnerships with the private sector, namely for the entrepreneurs who have lots of solutions, innovative solutions to deal with such problems. Thank you.
Brahim, maybe you can take already this question around the role of data. So data-driven, evidence-based policies, and also in relationship with the private sector.
شكرا ستيفانو. شكرا الأخ محمد.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you, Mohammed from Bahrain. Yes, in fact, what you said is not a question, it is an addition, because I consider that the issue of studies and the data that we can get from these studies are really interesting and important, and they are this is why I talked very quickly about this in my presentation. I talked about these institutions that are related to the preparation of data, collecting data, filtering them, making them very useful for all the people who are involved. So I consider that as something that is very important. We said that we have statistical institutions in the developed countries that collect all the data and give bulletins, and sometimes these bulletins are important and they are related they are really important for the decision makers because they rely on such data. Consequently, we can say that this adaptation to the requirements of this area makes the technology training on technology, take into consideration all these technological developments, something that is very important. The same applies to the environment, because these are two things that we need to focus on, and which are technology, IT technology and ITCs, how to use them in training, but also how to train the youth on using them for them to be really to reach some jobs that allow us to have some decent work. And some here, because while we're working with the ILO, we always focus on this issue of work, decent jobs, and sustainable work. Consequently, for us, ITC and green work is something that is very important, that will be helping on the sustainability of the work, on developing the work, and for it to be decent. In addition to, as Mr. Muhammad said, the technology will also go on in its developments, and we need to always be prepared. We cannot really have expectations, but we need to adapt. We need to be also positive actors. Now, for the partnership with the private sector, we cannot talk about any policies in the issue of vocational training and skills development without partnerships with the private sector for different reasons. First of all, this is the sector that will be giving us the information regarding its needs and skills in competencies that are required. Second, as Mr. Muhammad said, this private sector can surprise us. It can surprise us more than expressing its needs. It can tell us what are the solutions that we can resort to and that we can use in the future. I hope that I have answered this a very nice intervention that you have had from Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you very much. Thanks also for pointing out two very important and key, I would say, in these moments, policy levers, that is digital and green. So I think these are two very important priorities to be taken into account. Anita, maybe you want to add something before I give the floor to Mr. Hel Hussein, who has also raised hands.
Yes, in fact, I had raised my hands before he raised it, so I think maybe we could hear him first and I can speak later.
Okay, so Mr. Hel Hussein. Please, I see you have a raised hand.
مرحبا.
Good morning. Good morning, all. And thank you for this wonderful presentation that you have given us, Mr. Ibrahim. My question is the following: what are the mechanisms and the tools that the trade unions can use to strengthen their positions regarding the general policies and the general policies elaboration in the states? Let me give you an example. The minimum wages, the training programs. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, I would like to tell you that I think that one of the important issues that the trade unions can work through is the activation of the social responsibility of the private sector. So this social responsibility of the private sector is something that we can really build upon, namely through the trade unions. Thank you.
شكرا أخ خليفة الحسيني على
Thank you, Mr. Khalifa Al-Husseini, for these questions. First of all, regarding how the trade unions can really contribute in a more active way, in a more efficient way, and consequently have their say. This is why I said that the most important element within the methodology of the policy elaboration is this participatory approach that needs to be done through the participation of three stakeholders: the government, all the ministries, of course, and the employers on the other hand, and the trade unions, in addition, of course, to the civil society. But the main three elements are the administration, the government, the employers, and these trade unions. This is why they need to have an active role in order to get over the process. So let me talk personally. Of course, this is something that does not involve the ILO. I can say that we need to, as trade unions, to be wider in our thinking and
ليست مسألة نقاش
to produce something for the future. Let's talk about the decent jobs. This is not an issue of discussion between institutions or seminars. No, this is a general policy, a horizontal one that encompasses different issues. The same applies to the trade union, the same also with these trade unions that need also to work on some training programs for their own members to develop their own skills. Consequently, a unionist in his enterprise, in his company, needs to really understand the policy of the theory of policy elaboration, how to elaborate them, how to follow on them. And I think that this will make them better leaders. Now, regarding the social responsibility, when we have skills production, we need also to take into consideration the social aspect. So when we talk about skills development and vocational trainings, we need to rely on the social aspect as well. And this social aspect is very important. This is why the ILO also always talks about the social dialogue, and the social dialogue does not exclude any aspect, namely, the policy elaborations that is considered as a very important element. Consequently, this requires a lot of training, and it requires to know what is happening, to have more credibility in the dialogue amongst the different stakeholders. Consequently, the state also needs to be this kind of arbitrary for the dialogue to be equal amongst everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much also, Brahim, for this. First of all, thank you very much, Khalif, for the question, and Brahim for the response. The important role of trade unions. I think this is really a very important point to make this tripartite policy design and implementation actually working. And I think that the elements that Brahim was talking about in terms of capacity development, of capacity building, also of workers' representative at all levels, national, sectoral, local, and also enterprise level, is really key. And the ILO is investing a lot in terms of this capacity building for the workers group on skills. And we also look at skills becoming increasingly important in the workers' organizations agenda. I see there are many thank you, Brahim, in Arabic to your presentation. I think you should be proud of this. Anita, please.
Yes, thank you so much. No, I just that small comment. First of all, thanks to Brahim. It was very good, his presentation, and I agree with what everybody said. So first of all, of course, I forgot to say Sabah al-Khair to everybody first. And then I think what is important, I think, as Brahim was talking about the experience of Tunisia, and here we have a group of people who are mainly from the GCC area and the Gulf countries, but also other countries. But I think the interaction between MENA countries, like the whole North Africa, but also Arab partners together, is one interesting thing that we want for South-South and triangular cooperation. And then the other comment I wanted to make is that Mr. Brahim mentioned the example of Brazil. I happen to be Brazilian, so I just wanted to take a, a point to say that indeed that has always been a very important model, and we work through Sinterfor. I don't know if many of you have heard about it, but it's like in a way, a mini Turin for the Americas, right, Stefano, to make it, it has the same function of skills, profiles, databases, increasing expertise on skills, teaching, resource banks, communities of apprenticeship and practice. And that's a bit what we're trying to achieve here, to have this community of practice, sharing good experiences, including the ones from, I mean, of course, mainly the Arab partners, but also if we can do sometimes interregional, that's also interesting, so that we can learn from each other. So just thank Brahim for the examples, the presentation. And I saw some colleagues were, and also, of course, the question on social dialogue. That is a very critical way. In fact, the whole perception of how we should work is in a tripartite way. And the purpose of these courses is to feed the social dialogue and tripartite partners with some ideas to continue the skills development platforms and works, both on anticipation, recognition, and the different challenges that we have in skills development as a whole. I shared with you a bit earlier the link to some materials we had for another course on skills and Arab partners that might be useful for you because they are in Arabic. Some are in English as well. You have videos. So feel free also to ask me, Brahim and Stefano, and also my colleagues that I mentioned in the beginning, any additional questions. Duncan, Feisha, and Nancy also have experience. So over to you, Stefano.
Thank you very much. And really, thanks also for reinforcing this idea actually of looking into what is happening in other regions as an inspiration. We are looking at this in many different regions. Maybe the last question, Sana, please. Let us try to be quick because we have to move to our breakout rooms then.
Okay, good morning. صباح الخير على الجميع. أنا أولاً
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Ibrahim for this very important presentation.
هذا الموضوع. أنا تساؤلي للأستاذ إبراهيم إن في موضوع
My question to Mr. Ibrahim is related to the trade unionists. The trade unionists in the Gulf area require more information regarding the conventions, the decent work, and the skills that need to be given to the worker. And here we focus on the role of the trade unionists or the trade unions. First of all, to train the unionists on how to improve their skills and their knowledge. So we hope to have a specific course to be given to the unionists of the Gulf area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brahim, I will take this because this is more up to us. It is a good, actually a good idea of having trainings that are related, of course, only to workers. And by the way, the ACTRAV program here at the ITC-ILO, in collaboration with the ACTRAV program in Geneva, are actually also delivering several trainings in the different parts of the world for workers' organization. I will ask them, I mean, if this comes from you, from the field, it's of course very important to have this idea of strengthening the capacities. I think this is really a key important point. We want our workers' representative to be more trained about skills, in order to participate meaningfully in the policy dialogue that Brahim was talking about. And I think also to get out of some, let's say, key areas that workers are already involved in, and also be more involved in skills, which is very critical for the future and the stability of the workplace and of the jobs. So I think this is a very good point and is well taken. So I would now just share, thank you very much, Brahim, for the presentation.
Stefano, just 1 minute, Stefano. إجابة على very quick. إجابة على سؤال أنيتا.
In response to Anita's question, with respect to examples from Arab countries, some years ago, I was working with Alexu and conducting some studies on the reality of labor in the Arab countries, and I would be glad to share the results of this study with all the participants to this webinar. I can send it to Stefano, and we're ready to share it with you.
Thank you very much. Of course, this can be a supplementary reading that we can put in the platform. Thank you very much, Brahim. So now, before going into the breakout rooms, so we are going to create 4 breakout rooms as we did last time. So we have here 2 questions. I really ask the 4 groups to decide on if they want to work on 1 question or 2 questions as they like. First of all, this first question is actually related to something that we said on Tuesday, that you say during the webinar, we should kind of create more collaborations between the countries in order to have more aligned policies and strategies of skills development. So we would like to maybe know a bit more on which kind of network and collaborations can be put in place in order to align the policies. We have seen, for instance, in the European region, in the ASEAN region, in the SADC region, in the Latin American region, how this alignment was really fruitful for each country. So this is going to be the first question. The second question is around the financing. So we have been talking about policies. Of course, this cannot come without financing. So here we want to know from you, Brahim has talked about several actors participating in the policy design. Will they also participate in the financing of the skills development? So we want to understand better from you which kind of financing opportunities are available at the country level and the GCC level eventually to support skills development in the region. So you have these 2 questions. As usually, we have prepared a Padlet for you so that then at the end of our course, we will have all your reflections actually well structured. I just posted the link of the Padlet. So now we are going to open the rooms. You will have 16 minutes to work on these 2 questions, and then we will reconvene with some key elements that you will have discussed in the rooms. So please go in the room and immediately start discussing around these 2 questions. I'm also going to put the questions in the chat box so that everybody can see them. Thank you, and Asma, please open the rooms. Almost 60 participants.
شكرا جزيلا. نحن 60 مشاركا.
At 10 a.m. I have a meeting.
ستيفانو عند الساعة 10 لدي اجتماع مرتبط بالجي بي. يمكن لمجموعتي أن تكون هي الأولى. حسنا، شكرا جزيلا وتفضلي. ولكن بأي مجموعة أنت كنت؟ أنا لم أكن في المجموعة أنا كنت في المجموعة التي تتحدث عن التعاون ما بين دول الخليج. فاتن يمكنك أن تبدأي ببعض الكلمات وبعد ذلك أنا أعلق. وإبراهيم أيضا كان معنا في المجموعة. أنا لا أريد أن أضيع وقت.
And the translator is very, very nice and sweet, and all the intelligence and all the brains, the beautiful brains. I'm really having really joyful time with you guys all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want to tell us a bit more about these networks and collaboration that can be created?
Maybe the colleague from Saudi Arabia that had mentioned something about skill certification, or Saha wants to say something about the creation of network or unions. There was this kind of talk. Maybe one of them wants to say something.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi all. We were talking in the group about maybe Ms. Sana was talking about a union that can have the skills based on all GCC countries to be unified by maybe if I speak Arabic, it will be much better. Is it okay?
Yes, of course.
Of course, feel free.
There's translation.
It's your language. Go ahead.
أنا أتكلم بصفة عامة كده في شيء يعني في شيء أنا ما قلته يعني.
There is something that I would like. So I prefer Arabic because I want to be more accurate. So Mrs. Sana talked about some union that will be unifying or standardizing these skills. So to have one council or one union that will be standardizing the skills amongst the different GCC countries. And Mr. Brahim also talked about some certificates for the skills amongst the learners. For us in Saudi Arabia, we have the e-learning platform. This is a platform that encompasses different sub-local and international platforms giving training, and every student has a learning passport where we can register all the skills that are acquired by the student on the platform. I hope that I have given you a brief summary of what we said.
Thank you very much. I think it's interesting to hear these ideas. I'm also looking at the different posts that were posted in the, let's say, in the Padlet. So on one side, we have this idea of creating a committee of, let's say, between the different countries to reflect on skills development policies. Second is this idea that you were talking about exploiting, let's say, leveraging on the opportunities of the digitalization. And so constructing potentially common skill standards and then also common certifications using learning passports type of credentials. And I think this is also very interesting. We have seen also the idea of the GCC union. This could also be another idea of bringing together participants and the different countries. I've also heard about the Gulf Skills Authority. So is this related to the Gulf Skills competition?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
It is. Maybe you can already, because as Anita is always saying, let's start from what is already in place. I mean, it's not always about creating something new, but it's about also leveraging on the initiatives that are already in place. Lubna, maybe you want to tell us a bit more about the scope of the Gulf Skills Authority and how this could also be a platform for more collaboration.
And Stefano, there's somebody in the chat that said they would like to add something. Of course.
Feel free to open the microphone.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to add that we have in the Sultanate of Oman some good practices. Can we share it with the Gulf cities and the countries, I mean? Since we are also started to evaluate the skills in the both sectors, the private and government sectors, through specific platforms like Ijada. And I think by the end of this year, it would be something, new for the people here in Oman, but it would be also useful to have a data that can we share it with the Gulf countries. So also I would like to say it is, I'm supporting my college that we have, that we should have a union who is responsible about the skills only. And also we would like to have academic, sectors who are responsible also about it. They talk about it, but also I would share them the same ideas and the same, interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really also very interesting to hear the potential for this. Gulf Skills Authority, Lubna, maybe you wanted to add something about the Gulf Skills Authority?
Okay. For the, excuse me, I will speak by Arabic.
Of course.
بخصوص هيئة المهارات الخليجية.
Regarding the skills authority, the Gulf Skills Authority, in fact, this is something that is very similar to the international skills authority in its implementation and its work. In fact, our authority, the Gulf Authority, works on the skills that may be interesting for the youth between 18 to 25 years. So this is for some specific skills, and to 28, so 18 to 22, excuse me, for other types of skills. Of course, these skills are assessed, so there is a kind of competition. They work on for 3 days only on this specific project, and this is assessed by a group of experts from the GCC. This is for our Gulf Skills Authority. It is under the supervision of the Committee for Vocational Training and Teaching in the GCC countries. It is also linked to the Council of Ministers for Education and Vocational Training in the GCC countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So an initiative to build on. Anita, I will leave you for the last minutes.
Yes, I have exactly a minute before I can leave. No, so just I'd like to thank the group very much, because I think one of the translators volunteered to translate. So that meant that Fesha and I could actually contribute a little bit to the discussion. And the group was very proactive. And you heard the comments and what they are expecting. There this strong call for the GCC union on skills. So I think that's something we will take note of. I think Fesha even mentioned the question of, creating a network, which is different than a union, but anyway, it's interesting possibilities, if you don't have the union immediately, at least have the network. But then, as you said, Stefano, we can work through the Gulf Skills Authority, but to see to which extent that is very participatory and inclusive, this is what has to be checked. And then there was also a question from some points from the Saudi colleague mentioning that in Saudi Arabia, you have this skills certification and some form of learning passport, and this can be shared among the Gulf countries. So I unfortunately have to leave, but these are all very important points, and maybe they were also common in the other group. And you can, I don't know where they can add them, if it's in the Padlet, in the chat, but I think
it's already in the Padlet. So
yes, so keeping good track of these in the Padlet is great, because I think this is interesting to bring back to our ILO regional office as well.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And also we let you go, but also I think in interest of time, we are going to conclude our webinar now. As usual, it has been really a very good and refreshing experience. I see also that US participants are really liking this format, and we are really happy to be providing this service. Tell me, Anita.
Yes, maybe I don't want to jump in your closing, but I think it would be nice if Group 2 got the chance to say something as well, no? Or at least one representative.
Sorry, from?
The second group, the other group.
There were others also who commented.
Okay, fantastic.
They were from others. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I then agree with you in closing, but I have to leave actually. So thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much to. There's an echo here. So thank you very much to everybody. It was once again very interesting. I would like to thank in particular Brahim for the lesson that was given, and I think it was super interesting, and really a lot of also thanking from the participants testimony of really the good quality of the presentation and the interest around this topic. We are going to speak about competency-based approach and competency-based education and training next week. So we will meet once again Tuesday and then Thursday. So we will be accompanied the next Tuesday by our colleague Nasser Shraiti, so another Arabic speaker. So once again, music to the ears of Arabic speakers. So this has been really a great webinar today. Once again, thanks to all of you, thanks to my colleagues, thanks to all the participants, very huge number that have connected today for the session. And we are going to talk on Tuesday. So have a nice end of the week, have a nice weekend. It was great, and more, let's say, also reflection on our Padlets and on our outputs going forward. Once again, thank you very much and have a nice rest of the week. Bye-bye. Shukran.
Thank you. Nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.